It's January 16th here in Seoul, and I'm Kim Dami. We begin with these stories making the headlines at this hour, starting with another show of hostility from North Korea. Leader Kim Jong-un says South Korea should be labeled as the #1 hostile country in the regime's constitution. The North also says it's abolishing agencies that manage inter-Korean affairs. Republican voters in the state of Iowa are heading to polling stations in freezing weather to cast the first votes of the 2024 presidential election, where Donald Trump is seeking early victory in Iowa caucus. Team Korea is off to a great start at the Asian Cup in Qatar, beating Bahrain 3-1 on Monday. PSG midfielder Kang-in broke a 1-1 deadlock with 2 goals in the second half. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un says South Korea should be inked as #1 hostile country in the regime's constitution. The North held a key parliamentary meeting on Monday, where they also decided to get rid of agencies in charge of promoting inter-Korean dialogue and cooperation. Our Choi Min-jung leads us off this morning.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is now pushing to make constitutional amendments to officially define South Korea as the most hostile state to the regime. The order was made on Monday during the 10th session of the 14th Supreme People's Assembly. According to state newspaper the Nodongshinmun, Kim said the regime's education and cultural sectors must strengthen the description of South Korea as being North Korea's, quote, #1 hostile country and unchangeable main enemy. Kim said it is important for the Constitution to reflect the idea of completely occupying, suppressing, and recapturing South Korea in the event of war, and incorporating it into the North's territory. He also called for legal measures to declare South Korea as a completely foreign country with no intention of reconciliation and unification. Expressions such as the Northern region and peaceful unification were ordered to be deleted from the Constitution. He added that people should not use words that mislead the North and the South into being compatriots, such as referring to the peninsula as the nations of 80 million people. Also in the meeting, North Korea decided to abolish agencies in charge of inter-Korean affairs. Pyongyang's Korean Central News Agency reported that the regime will dismantle the National Committee for the Peaceful Reunification of the Fatherland and an agency in charge of the Mount Kumgang Tour project. The cabinet and relevant agencies are set to establish practical measures to implement this decision. Choi Min-jung, Arirang News.
Russia is moving to further tighten its ties with North Korea. Kremlin spokesperson Dmitry Peskov said on Monday that Russia intends to further develop its partnership with the North, whom he called Russia's closest neighbor and partner in all areas. North Korea's Foreign Minister Choi Sun-hee arrived in Moscow for an official visit that's scheduled to last until Wednesday. Choi, who will be meeting with her Russian counterpart Sergei Lavrov on Tuesday, may also meet with President Vladimir Putin. The spokesperson also added that Russia hopes that Putin's visit to North Korea will take place soon. Iran-backed Houthi rebels struck a U.S.-owned and operated cargo ship on Monday using an anti-ship ballistic missile. The attack came days after a U.S.-led coalition carried out strikes against the rebel group. Lee Seung-ja has the latest.
Tensions continue to flare in the Red Sea as Yemen's Houthi rebels launched an anti-ship ballistic missile, which struck a U.S.-owned and operated cargo ship on Monday. The attack against the Gibraltar Eagle marks the first time the rebel group have successfully struck a U.S.-owned or operated ship. The Marshall Island-flagged bulk carrier sustained minor damage but did not report any injuries on board. The attack comes as the Houthis announced their intention to target American ships. A Houthi spokesman added that the U.S., which recently led multinational airstrikes targeting Houthi strongholds in Yemen, was in danger of losing maritime security. He went on to say that all ships from countries participating in military attacks against them are considered enemy targets. Meanwhile, Israel's Defense Minister Yoav Gallant said on Monday that Palestinians will govern the Gaza Strip after the war with Israel ends, adding that Hamas rule and military threat in the enclave will also end after the war. At a press conference, Gallant stressed that as Palestinians live in the Gaza Strip, it will be the Palestinians who will live and govern it in the future. He said there would no longer be any military threat from Gaza, as the militant group won't be able to rule and function as a military force in the region. The defense chief added that the future government would be a civilian alternative, but insisted that the Israeli military would have the freedom of operation in order to protect Israeli citizens. Lee Seung-jae, Arirang News.
U.S. Republicans kick off their presidential primaries on Monday. Voting in the Iowa caucus will begin in less than an hour at 7 p.m. local time. Former President Donald Trump, largely seen as the GOP frontrunner, is eyeing a majority victory, while both former UN Ambassador Nikki Haley and Florida Governor Ron DeSantis are aiming to position themselves as the main alternative to Trump. Iowa Republicans will gather at designated locations and vote in person for their party's nominee. Now, unlike in traditional primaries, caucus voters must appear in person, and the result will depend on how many supporters come out during an extreme cold snap sweeping the Midwestern state. Democrats are planning to kick off their first official primary on February 3rd in South Carolina, with the sitting President Joe Biden eyeing a re-election. The presidential election is set for November 5th. The World Economic Forum has already battled with a pandemic and recession, yet troubles from geopolitical instability into extreme weather just keep rolling in. Let's turn to Professor Mason Ritchie for more. Welcome back.
Hi, thanks for having me.
Good morning. This year's motto is all about rebuilding trust. Now, rebuilding trust seems to be an extension or a continuation of the theme, working together, restoring trust back in 2020. Professor Ritchie, what exactly will rebuilding trust entail?
Well, first of all, rebuilding trust implicitly accepts that international institutions, international organizations, governments, non-government organizations, multinational corporations have lost the confidence of the global population, and also the leaders among these institutions have also lost trust among themselves. Now, I'm not sure that a meeting of these elites in Switzerland is the answer to that issue, but putting that aside, rebuilding trust for Davos Man is this year focused on three main axes: transparency, consistency, and accountability among leaders. Within that context, we'll see agenda items including global security, obviously trade and economic growth, jobs, climate, energy transition, technology, notably artificial intelligence. And these issues are sort of put into four buckets. One is achieving security, then you have creating growth, artificial intelligence as a driving force in society and in the economy, and then long-term challenges, climate change, energy transition, and the preservation of nature.
Definitely. We all have to agree the Ukraine crisis was what dominated the security talks last year. But now the worsening situation over in the Middle East will be high on the agenda this year. Can we expect some constructive conversations this time? What do you think?
I frankly don't expect anything productive to happen on the Israel and Hamas conflict front. Israel is implementing its military plan, and really it's only the United States that can affect the calculus in Israel about how it wants to move forward. And so far, the Biden administration hasn't moved very much in terms of trying to pressure Israel one way or another. It's largely let Israel go about its military strategy in Gaza as it wants. And Davos Man isn't going to have much to say about that. As for Russia and Ukraine, the Ukrainian president, Volodymyr Zelensky, has called for a Swiss-led peace conference. But Russia isn't likely to be interested, given what's happened with the sort of failed Ukrainian counteroffensive and some of the progress that Russia has been making, even though it's been very small. And in any event, Russia isn't going to be invited to this peace conference anyway. Davos could be used as a platform for this type of peace initiative, but frankly speaking, Zelensky's call for this peace conference looks to me like a tactic for him to shore up support and get some weapons that have come into question in terms of support from its international partners by arguing for an impossible peace in order to be able to say, well, we tried, but we weren't able to move forward, so now you need to come back and support us again. I don't blame him for that. It's a perfectly legitimate strategy, but I don't really think that Davos itself is going to create much room for an actual peace process.
I see. On top of discussions on geopolitical tensions, another key focus point will be on AI as a driving force for the economy and society. How will such a topic be incorporated into that rebuilding trust motto?
Well, I think that there are at least two ways in which we can think about this. I'll be honest with you, I'm not exactly sure that's what Davos man is thinking, but in the first place, politically, much of the fear that we have about artificial intelligence, in addition to the positive sides of it, of course, comes in the form of our concern about misinformation and disinformation and the way that artificial intelligence can accelerate that. And of course, misinformation and disinformation are already a problem. This will presumably only become potentially more dramatic as AI gets better at, for instance, producing deep fakes. So there'll be quite a bit of discussion, I think, about how to mitigate those problems. And then economically, of course, the big concern with artificial intelligence, in addition to its positive side, of course, is its impact on jobs. What impact will artificial intelligence have on jobs? We've seen statistics where, as many as 60% of global jobs could be impacted in some way by artificial intelligence, including, of course, potentially lots of people through technological change losing their jobs. So presumably there will be some discussion of that as well.
Definitely. Professor Ritchie, before I let you go, but the leaders of countries, briefly, the US, China, and the UK and Germany are not attending the event this year, which is why some experts are, questioning its relevance.
Yeah, so obviously, President Biden isn't going to be there. Xi Jinping isn't going to be there. Olaf Scholz, who was there last year, won't be there. France's President Emmanuel Macron will be there. The Chinese Premier Li will be there. The European Union Commission President Ursula von der Leyen will be there. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken will be there. South Korean Prime Minister Han Duck-soo will be there. So, of course, there will be leaders as usual. There'll be several hundred of them in addition to the, 15 or 100 or so other global elites who are going to be there. I think the real question is, was Davos ever really relevant in terms of actually moving the world forward? It's mostly a talk shop for elitists and a place for them to network. I guess it works in some ways in terms of networking for helping set the global agenda. And in that sense, I don't think Davos is any worse off than it was before.
All right, Professor Ritchie, thank you so much for joining us this morning. You have a wonderful day.
Great. Thanks to you.
South Korea's men's national football team kicked off their AFC Asian Cup campaign with a convincing 3-1 win over Bahrain on Monday. At the Jassim bin Hamad Stadium in Doha, South Korean midfielder Hwang In-bum got the Taeguk Warriors off the mark in the 38th minute before Bahrain equalized just 6 minutes into the second half. PSG star Kang-in restored South Korea's lead with a left-foot rocket from outside the box in the 56th minute. And he showed some quick feet in the Bahrain box in the 69th minute before curling home his second to wrap up the victory. South Korea will play Jordan on Saturday for their second Group E match. South Korea will build a semiconductor mega cluster in Gyeonggi-do province by 2047. Now, to make that happen, over $472 billion will be poured in the grand project. Our presidential office correspondent Oh Soo-young has the details.
South Korea is betting on semiconductors to provide at least 3 million quality jobs by fostering the world's largest chip cluster by 2047. That's according to a policy briefing by the Ministers of Industry and Science to President Yoon Suk-yeol, who has been opening up a 10-part series of government reports to members of the public. With the third such session spotlighting semiconductors as the country's leading export item, the government pledged to back corporate-led efforts to foster a cutting-edge mega chip cluster in Gyeonggi-do province, home to Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. The two global chip giants will invest over $472 billion as part of national efforts to add more foundries and memory chip plants across the 21-square-meter belt. The government plans to increase tax waivers for investment in chip facilities by up to 25%, as well as create research centres with leading academic institutions and nurture 150,000 professionals in the field.
Semiconductors translate to people's livelihoods. Once completed, a total of 37 fabs will give a major boost to the economy. The industry will create 3.46 million quality jobs, $492 billion in production, and $154 billion in extra sales for affiliated firms.
Upon completion, the cluster would boast a monthly production capacity of some 7.7 million wafers, the largest in the world. According to the government, semiconductors have been South Korea's #1 export item for 11 straight years and make up around 10% of the trade-dependent country's gross domestic product. The president on Monday said building a chip ecosystem would enrich people's livelihoods and also determine the country's economic security going forward.
우리가 평소에 그걸 잘 못 느낄 수 있어요. 이게 반도체 공장이 만들어지면서 거기에 따른 이런 생태계가 조성이 되고 전후방 이런 동반 투자 효과가 생겨서 우리에게 이런 일자리가 생기는 건지 못 느끼는 경우가 많이 있습니다만은 반도체라는 거는 그만큼 우리 일반 국민들, 중산층, 서민들의 민생에 엄청난 영향을 주는 산업이라는 것을 우리가 잘 알아야 될 것 같습니다. 그러다 보니까 지금 선진국들은 이런 반도체 메가 클러스터를 구축하기 위해서 아주 치열한 전쟁을 벌이고 있습니다.
To become a first mover in cutting-edge chip technology, Yoon called for all-out support, including sufficient electricity from nuclear energy to power the cluster. Large-scale fabrication plants in Yongin City alone are expected to require 10 gigawatts of electricity, equivalent to a quarter of the amount consumed in the Seoul capital area. The president also stressed the need for tax incentives, a wider pool of chip professionals, and collaborations with major chip producers in the global supply chain, referring to the administration's supply chain dialogue forged with the United States and Japan last year, as well as a semiconductor alliance with the Netherlands, the world's largest supplier of lithography machines. With the chip cluster up and running, the country aims to increase domestic production of key parts and equipment to 50% by 2030. Oh Soo-young, Arirang News.
Then why is it that South Korea is so devoted and investing so much in the chip mega cluster? And how realizable is South Korea's strategy to lead the global chip race? Our Lee Soo-jin has this report.
South Korea is gearing up to become #1 in the global semiconductor industry. The world's largest chip production base, located in southern Gyeonggi-do province, will bring together chip equipment manufacturers, fabless chip producers, and R&D labs. By 2047, the mega cluster will have 13 chip production plants and 3 research facilities through investment amounting to 622 trillion won, or around $470 billion from private companies such as Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. By 2030, the aim is to produce 7.7 million wafers, the base material for the chip manufacturing process, per month. And production of cutting-edge memory semiconductor technologies such as high-bandwidth memory and sub-2 nanometer processor chips will also be possible at this base. What benefits can this singular large manufacturing base bring?
The government is trying to stabilize the semiconductor ecosystem, and this is a strategy to become #1 in both the memory and non-memory sectors before other advanced nations.
South Korea, a major player in the global memory chip maker sector, has been trying for years to expand its presence in the non-memory sector as it makes up a significant portion of the semiconductor market. The same experts said that becoming a forerunner in the non-memory sector will ultimately help stabilize the nation's semiconductor supply chain, also boosting the nation's overall economy as chips are South Korea's largest export item. But there are a lot of things to do until the mega cluster is up and running.
It's important to create a comprehensive solution where we don't just focus on attracting not just international firms, but also domestic small and medium-sized enterprises, especially those in the chip material, parts, and equipment sector.
The expert added that SMEs in the chip industry are also capable of providing the necessary infrastructure and expertise. Lee Soo-jin, Arirang News.
Good morning, I'm Kim Xiang, and now we turn over to stories from around the world. We begin today in Taipei, where a delegation of former U.S. high-level officials met on Monday with Taiwanese President Tsai Ing-wen and her successor, President-elect Lai Ching-te. 64-year-old President-elect Lai Ching-te of Taiwan's Democratic Progressive Party, which is critical of Beijing, won 40% of Saturday's votes. Monday's U.S. delegation included former National Security Advisor Stephen J. Hadley and former Deputy Secretary of State James B. Steinberg. It was led by Laura Rosenberger, chair of the American Institute of Taiwan, Washington's unofficial embassy on the island. Meanwhile, amid growing tensions, the Central Pacific island nation of Nauru on Monday announced it was severing diplomatic ties with Taiwan. Earlier the same day, Nauru declared intentions to seek former ties with China. This leaves Taiwan with only 12 diplomatic allies around the world. The UN's Food and Agriculture Organization warned Sunday that millions in Sudan are facing starvation amid continued armed conflict there. According to an FAO representative in Sudan, more than 25 million people are in need of humanitarian assistance, with 18 million, some 40% of the population, in immediate desperate need of food security assistance. Since the outbreak of armed conflict in April 2023, production of millet in Sudan has almost halved, while maize production has decreased by a quarter. Basic grain prices rose by 200% last year. The war between rival factions of the military government of Sudan has left at least 12,000 dead and more than 7.6 million people displaced. Spain's World Cup winner and Barcelona Femeni's midfielder Aitana Bonmati has won the Best FIFA Women's Player Award for 2023. She beat her Barcelona teammate Jenny Hermoso to win the 2023 Best FIFA Football Award ceremony at London's Hammersmith Apollo on Monday. Argentina captain and Inter Miami forward Lionel Messi won the Best FIFA Men's Player Award for a third time, beating Manchester City striker Erling Haaland and Paris Saint-Germain forward Kylian Mbappe. The Best FIFA Men's Coach Award went to Manchester City manager Pep Guardiola, while England manager Sarina Wiegman won the Best Women's Coach Award. Over to Brunei now, where the country is celebrating the royal wedding of Prince Abdul Mateen, the fourth son of world's longest reigning monarch and one of the world's richest men, Sultan Hassan al-Bolkiah. The lavish 10-day-long wedding began on the 7th of January. Although Prince Mateen is only sixth in line to the throne, he gained fame in recent years by accompanying his father on diplomatic engagements. His bride, Anisha Rosna Isa Kalebik, is the granddaughter of one of Sultan Bolkiah's key advisors. Leaders and royals from neighboring countries, including Saudi Arabia and UAE, attended the couple's Islamic wedding ceremony on Thursday.
Good morning. It's a colder start to the day. A severe cold snap continues today in most places. A cold wave warning in parts of Gangwon-do and Gyeonggi-do provinces dragged down the morning temperatures to below minus 15 degrees Celsius. And Seoul is waking up to a colder morning with the biting winds. But cold wave conditions will subside from this afternoon. Highs will rise fast, getting up to 4 degrees this afternoon here in the capital. Tomorrow we'll wake up to a warmer morning with higher dust levels. Afternoon highs will be 1 to 4 degrees higher this afternoon, topping out at 4 degrees in Seoul, Gwangju at 8 degrees Celsius. Busan and Jeju will see a high of 10 degrees Celsius this afternoon. Sunny skies will be joined by more clouds in the afternoon. Instead of a chill, we'll see frequent wintry precipitation for the remainder of the week. East of Gangwon-do province will need to brace for a mix of rain and snow at the end of the week and through the weekend. That's Korea for you, and here's a look at the international weather conditions.
We thank you for watching New Day at Arirang. We'll be back tomorrow for Wednesday's edition at the same time, 9 a.m. Korea time.